Good morning, everyone. I think we can get started at this point. We're a few minutes after the hour, and most of our attendees, it looks like, have logged in. Hello, and thanks for joining us for our product release webcast for LumenVox 14.1.100. I'm going to double check real quick if my compatriot Nigel, who is on here with me, will start his recording. I am also started mine.
Yep, I'm all good.
Should be good. Okay, good deal. All right. So I'm Jeff Hopper, Vice President of Client Services at LumenVox. My team is responsible for sales engineering support to our partners and post-sales technical support to partners and customers. I think most of you have heard me on previous webcasts for product releases. I'm joined this morning by Nigel Quinnen, who's our Vice President of Product Development. Nigel and his team are responsible for the actual core development of our software that we provide, and he's here to keep my technical veracity high and make sure we can address any questions that you might have. We'll get started with our agenda this morning, and let me advance here a little bit. Okay, we're going to do the short introduction and then jump right into the deep mechanics here. In today's presentation, we'll provide some brief introductory material for background, and then we'll discuss the principal new features, changes, and fixes in LumenVox 14.1.100. We will review some of the resources available to you as a user of LumenVox, and then we'll conduct a Q&A session to address any questions. Finally, we'll have a short wrap-up after that with some follow-up information for you that I think will be useful and important in the long run. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is just set the expectations correctly around our webcast this morning. This is a discussion about the changes in 14.1.100 and is intended for a technical audience. We assume that you have some familiarity with the existing LumenVox product suite, and we'll particularly focus on new features or changes to default behaviors between 14.1 and .100 and the previous release 14.0.100. A couple of things to remind you about in our release schedule. We typically release new upgrades or versions 2 to 4 times a year, and this is the second of the 14.x series. We always have full release notes available online in our knowledge base, and I would encourage you to review the release notes in their full detail at your convenience, and to always review those before you upgrade to a new release, so that you can be mindful of any changes that might impact your specific installation or application requirements. We also like to make sure that everybody understands we provide support for the current release and the past 8 releases, or for versions released within the past 2 years, whichever is greater. Typically those are just about the same number with our 4X release schedule. Sometimes that varies a little bit, so we always like to make sure you're comfortable that we have at least 8 releases or 2 years, whichever is the greater number of those that we can provide technical support for. It's also important to understand that if you upgrade to a new version of software, and we strongly encourage our customer base to upgrade to 14.1.100, as you'll see for a variety of reasons when we go through this webcast, your software needs to be under a current maintenance contract for your licenses to be valid and allow that installation. It's useful to understand that all LumenVox licenses have a maintenance expiration date. In order to install a newer LumenVox version, your existing licenses must have a maintenance expiration date that is equal to or greater than the release date of the new version of LumenVox software that you wish to install. If you have questions about that maintenance expiration date, you can contact LumenVox technical support or your LumenVox account representative, and they can help you with that and provide any additional information that you might need. We're actually going to show you how to use the new dashboard functionality to look at those expiration dates also in just a few minutes in the webcast. As we talk, we'd like you to feel free to ask questions over the questions panel on the webinar. We will try and answer your questions as part of the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And if there's any question that we can't answer over the course of this session, we'll answer it offline via email or a phone call with you after we finish the presentation. Okay. Now on to the new features. There we go. I think the most important thing to discuss today is the advancements that we've made to the LumenVox Dashboard. We have a new Diagnostics tab that's been added to the Dashboard utility. The dashboard itself has been around for several product generations now, but this is a significant advancement to the functionality in the dashboard and what it can offer for you. This Diagnostics utility can be used to check system configuration and test functionality. And there are also options available to globally change logging verbosity, to debug or default levels as you need for particular situations, or to clear the LumenVox logs. That's always been a useful thing when you're trying to diagnose a problem, look for an issue, work through some troubleshooting step. If you can clear the logs, then reproduce the issue that you're trying to look for, it's much easier to identify what's going on in the log files without all the extraneous information there. We've also added an option to send diagnostic reports to LumenVox or save those reports to disk so that you can use them on other PCs. Some other functionality that's been added to the dashboard this past is the ability to disable monitoring certain LumenVox services on the local machine as needed. This allows you to prevent indicating issues with services that you don't intend to use. A good example of this is the seldom used call indexer service that is now unmonitored by default. All of these monitoring options coincide with the new diagnostic tests that are also available. The dashboard configuration screens now include a number of different filtering options, if you will, that are basic, intermediate, and advanced, that allow new or occasional users who aren't familiar with all of the myriad options available to have better clarity about just what they're doing and what they're altering. Given the number of possible options for some of the LumenVox services, we think this should make it much easier for users to manage and use those options effectively. And then there is a summary page on the dashboard that now has some significant additional information that we think is useful. If you can see from the screenshot that we have up, we've added the ability to be aware of remote machines that are involved in a LumenVox installation. By configuring the files, or changing the config files, I should say, on the local machine, you can actually be aware of remote ASR or TTS or media servers that are used in your installation. And you'll see those listed at the bottom of the dashboard. And in fact, the IP address button that's located next to each will actually launch the dashboard on that machine so that you can edit, review, and manage those remote servers. When you click that launch button, it actually opens a new browser window for each of these machines. There are a couple of things that are important to understand about the dashboard here too. The context of each dashboard view that you look at is the local machine that dashboard and that LumenVox tools or manager is running on, and not the other machines, which is why you'd want to be able to look at the LumenVox manager on each of the other machines that are involved in your installation environment. I wanted to show you a little bit of an example here on the configuration screens that now include the basic, intermediate, and advanced filtering. You can see that in this particular example, this is the basic view for a LumenVox server for the license server. We can advance to the intermediate view, and you can see a great deal of additional information is available there that is more detailed, or things that you are not likely to change or adjust as often. And then when you go to advanced view, you will see everything that is available for that particular service. Excuse me, I have a little cough going this morning. The other thing that I mentioned earlier that we wanted to show you and make sure you understood how to use is the ability to look at your licenses that are currently installed in the licensing tab of the dashboard. And in particular, if you use the Expand All button, which you can see right up here in the top of that screen, you can see the maintenance expiration date that is available for the licenses that you're installing or that you're trying to use. That will help you know what the current maintenance expiration date is for each set of licenses that's on your machine, and thus which ones are eligible for upgrade or might need to have maintenance contract extended so that you would be eligible for an upgrade. Okay. Now the big new tool set that we've added this past is the Diagnostics tab. So I want to take a couple of minutes and drill down on that in particular, because this provides a really rich set of capabilities. It's based on the feedback we've received from our customers over the last few years since we introduced the new dashboard management utility here, and we think it will really make a difference in your ability to easily install, configure, and manage your LumenVox installations. You can see that there are several different choices here that are available: running diagnostic tests, clearing logs, setting the debug logging verbosity level, setting it back to default. And the really nice thing about these tools is that they're very comprehensive. You don't have to go to each of the individual LumenVox services, for instance, to change their logging verbosity. You can change all of them with a single choice here in the new Diagnostics tool. Once you choose, let's say the first thing is to run the Diagnostics test, we begin a series of steps that look at the installation, the configuration, and the licensing that you have implemented on this particular machine. The first of those is the network connectivity that lets you make sure that you have a network connection, that you can reach the LumenVox license servers in the cloud, that each of your LumenVox servers is running correctly or not. And in fact, you'll even notice down here at the bottom in this case, I mentioned that the new default is to not monitor the call indexer service, because most people don't run that on their production machines. So you can see that that service is not monitored in this particular example. Then the next thing that the dashboard will do in this diagnostic set is to actually do an analysis of what's installed and what's licensed. In this particular example, you can see that I have licenses for a number of 8 kilohertz TTS voices that I do not have installed. That's a very common mistake we see in the real world, where somebody forgets to install the voice pack for a specific voice, even though they've licensed it, and then you know, they might not get the results they want in TTS synthesis. You can also see, you know, the results of the successful results of what's installed, what's licensed, and you can see an indicator over here on the left-hand side of whether this is an error, a warning, or an OK check in that case. So it gives us a really good idea, both you and if you need assistance from LumenVox support, of exactly what's going on in your environment and how that's working. And then the last thing is a series of functional tests. And this basically attempts to do ASR decodes with each of the available languages, TTS synthesis with each of the available voices, licensing acquisition, and a number of elements of the configuration, so that you can be reasonably assured that you are or are not successfully and correctly configured in your installation process, and that those services are all running correctly. And finally, that generates a report that you can review locally, that is very comprehensive. You can save to disk, or one of the features that we're really happy about is that you can send that report to LumenVox. If you click on this hyperlink for Send Report to LumenVox, you're walked through a series of questions, if you will, that let you tell us who you are, what you're sending to us, and why you're sending it. And that will automatically FTP the report, and if you choose, also the log files that are stored locally directly to LumenVox support. And then we have a mechanism in place at our end that will notify the support team that you've submitted a set of logs or a report, so that we can review those and work with you to resolve whatever issue might be handy. We think this will make this a lot easier for everybody, instead of having to go hunt down where the log files are for each particular service, for instance, you know, in different directories that depend on what you have installed. So it should make the support process and the diagnostic process for troubleshooting much easier for everyone using LumenVox these days. Okay. couple of other things that we've done that I think are important to call out. We've previously used the LumenVox command line diagnostic tools like LV Show Config with the assumption that they are looking at an U.S. English installation, because by far the preponderance of our customers are using U.S. English. But this was regardless of what other languages you might actually be using. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a big increase in the amount of non-English installations where we have another primary language and may not even have English installed. So we've made some adjustments to those tools that now allow you to specify the ASR and TTS languages that you wish to test. So it's easier to test an installation for a non-US English or other, other language choice and make that a much more effective tool for you. And that's also incorporated into the diagnostic testing that's in the dashboard. I think the other big change that we've made this year, and it's one that I'm excited about because we've had lots of customer requests, is the addition of a new remote monitoring web API. As I said, we've had several requests from customers for this as a way to allow you to monitor the status of your LumenVox services on a machine-by-machine basis with any of the typical data center monitoring tools such as Nagios or other SNMP tools that you might have. What we've done is basically add a web interface that is hosted by the LumenVox Manager service, and that's the same service that supports the LumenVox Dashboard. And this interface gives you the ability to use a simple URL to retrieve the status of each of the LumenVox processes that are located on and monitored by the Manager service on a machine-by-machine basis. So the Manager services that can be monitored are the Manager itself, the license server, the media server, the ASR server, and TTS server, and the call indexer. You can see there's a very simple protocol to address the Manager on a given machine to get that API status for each of the services. It's an HTTPS machine address API/status/service name, and the result of that is one of 3 statuses, either online, offline, or unmonitored. So it's a very, very straightforward, very simple matrix of URLs and resulting statuses. I'll show you an example of what that looks like if you do that in your browser for the ASR status on a given machine. The return result might be an online, which you can see there, or whatever other status is the case. Excuse me, I had to cough again there. So this gives you the ability to very simply monitor the status of services on all of your machines. And I guess the one other thing I'll call out, we've added a number of knowledge base articles around that monitoring API. I'll show you those in the resources slide at the end. But you can use a variety of tools. We've created examples so that you can see how to use those URLs from different tools. And again, we think that'll just make the ability to monitor and check on the status much easier for you throughout this process. Some of the other changes that we've made this pass include enhancements to the phonetic speller and random sentence generator dialogues in the speech tenor. We had some feedback from customers who had sort of non-standard Windows font configurations that there was some screen resolution and sizing problems. We've done some work to make those look much better and have the correct controls displayed on them. And we've added an option to configure license servers from within the dashboard so that there are more configuration file settings available from within the dashboard. We will continue to enhance the things that are accessible from the dashboard and more intend on focusing on making everything that you use in your LumenVox environment editable and manageable directly from that dashboard. There are some other changes that we've made that are more edge case items or small items. I would encourage you to go back again and look at the release notes for those. Take a good solid peek, and you will be able to see what we've got going in that arena in more detail. We've also picked up a couple of fixes, as is usually the case. We've been very fortunate the last several releases of LumenVox products have not had many what we would traditionally call bugs, so we've maintained our track record of very healthy releases. That said, we have fixed a few things. One of those is an issue in the speech tuner that related to incorrectly resolved grammar references when a particular combination of parent-child and grandchild grammars were used, and you can get into some complex relationships and complex editing relationships there that we've tried to resolve in the speech tuner. If you have any questions about that, that was based on some customer feedback. We're glad to have an individual conversation with you from our tech support team to explain what's going on in those changes. We also fixed an issue in the media server that occurred in some very unique cases when a barge-in detected message from an RSTP client gave us a particular response, and we had an error state that occurred there. So we've resolved that. That was also basically a specific customer and specific voice platform issue, but we're trying to always be responsive to those. There are a few other minor fixes that are included in the release, and again, I encourage you to go back and take a look at the release notes for the details on those. Okay. A couple of things here I want to mention as resources. We continually strive to have our knowledge base be a very useful tool for you, not something that's abstract. It is all of our product documentation and more. We have added several new articles to the knowledge base, in particular as relates to the new dashboard changes and the system monitoring service, the diagnostics, and a number of the things that we've added functionally. So there are 5, I think, new knowledge base articles that are fresh for the 14.1.100 release. If you go to the knowledge base at LumenVox.com and go to the very bottom of the first page of the knowledge base, there's always a list there of new or recently updated articles. So I encourage everybody to take that extra half-second, scroll to the bottom of that page when you go to the knowledge base and make yourself aware of articles that have changed or been added recently, because they're usually there for a good reason. Somebody's asked us a question and we've codified some additional information for them out of that process, or we're covering new information around the enhancements we're making to the product. Some other articles that have changed recently since the past release but aren't directly related to 14.1 are articles on flexible licensing and our network firewalls article. Since the flexible license process that we use now communicates with a LumenVox license cloud, it's very important to know that you've got the network environment set correctly to facilitate that communication. So we've added a rather extensive article about the network requirements for communicating between LumenVox processes and between the LumenVox installation and our license cloud that have been updated in the knowledge base for you. And I think we've had a number of people give us good feedback that those have been very useful additions of information. The other thing that makes that particularly important information for you is that effective with the 14.1.100 release, we will only be using our new flexible licensing mode for new deployments and for new customers. That's not to say that our legacy licensing mechanism goes away yet for existing customers or existing deployments, but we will require now that all new deployments and new customers use flexible licensing. This product component has been in place now for a couple of years. We've made a number of enhancements to it over that period of time, and it is performing in a very admirable, rock-solid way. I think almost all of our customers who've made the migration to flex licensing find our licenses are easier to use, easier to install, and easier to understand these days. We'd like to encourage all of our existing customers who are going to upgrade installations of LumenVox to 14.1 to consider migrating to flexible licensing also. And to that end, our client services team and support teams will be glad to assist you in discussing, planning, and implementing that migration of license server modes from our old legacy system to the new flexible licensing. Okay. All right, I think we're ready for our Q&A section here. So let me see if I can get the right screen up. And we'll see what questions we have. So Nigel, do you have any questions so far?
Nothing really that's come up so far. I think you covered a lot of the bases there, and a lot of the very valid points. We actually just had a question come in there about when flex licensing was introduced. So I can take a quick look at that, unless you know off the top of your head there, Jeff.
I believe that was one of the late 11.x releases. So we've had it out for probably, I'm going to guess, 6 or 8 releases without looking at this point. And we've steadily increased the number of customers using flex licensing. And in fact, some of our largest volume use customers are using flex licensing, which we thought was an important element to understand, because it does give much more robust licensing support for our customers. We wanted to make sure that the mechanisms are really rock solid.
Exactly, and just in addition to that, I mean, it's probably worth mentioning that a lot of the energy and the effort that went into the development of the flexible licensing mechanism that we've introduced. I actually took a quick look at the release notes, and it's actually not mentioned in there. I think one of the reasons for that was we actually put it out in a much earlier version, but didn't really announce the launch of the flexible service. We actually worked fairly closely with a few key partners on the initial flexible licensing mechanism, just to make sure that it was solid. But again, just to reiterate, a lot of the functionality and a lot of the change and effort that went into the flexible licensing was really to support some of the friction areas that we've had with customers. We've seen with customers, people have problems installing licenses, updating licenses, figuring out where their licenses are. As Jeff mentioned there before, the new flexible licensing mechanism makes life much easier for you guys. So that's why we're encouraging people to move over to that. As Jeff rightly says, we've had it out there and it's been rock stable for a couple of years, and people seem to really like it. It gives them much more, well, as the name suggests, flexibility in licensing.
Right.
Let's see, a couple of other questions coming in here. So we have. Can the monitoring be used to trigger notifications, or is it just a performance and diagnostic viewing? So the answer is it's a very simple interface. That the monitoring web API, I think, is what's being asked about here. And really, this was brought about, as Jeff suggested there. We've had various requests from, again, some of our larger partners. I think now that we see a lot of our installations going into larger and larger data centers, or people are becoming more technically savvy, I guess, that they want to be able to see the status of these various services, certainly the LumenVox services. If they're critical to production, they need to know that the things are running, and they want, obviously, quick notification if there are any issues with those. So this is a very simple web API that we developed to allow the IT managers to be able to very easily, seamlessly integrate the status of the various LumenVox services into their, whichever monitoring systems they are using. And the way that we designed it to be very, very simple was it wasn't geared towards one particular mechanism or another. It should be fairly generic and should be able to be plugged in fairly easily to most of those monitoring services.
Right. Nigel, the thing I would add there, I think, is that basically the monitoring API gives you as a customer the ability to use your existing network operational monitoring tools to query the LumenVox services. We don't proactively push out a notification message. It's a passive ask about the status, and the monitor provides a response for you. Mm-hmm. So you need to facilitate the monitoring, at your end in whatever tools you use, whether it's something like HP OpenView or Nagios, the open source tool, or other things, mm-hmm. so that your environment can query the status from LumenVox. It's not a push notification. It's a request status and get a response.
Absolutely. That's a very, very valid point. And yes, that's absolutely how it was intended. A couple of other questions coming in here. I've had a kind of a repeat question, like which version was Flex licenses introduced. Again, I took a quick look here while we were online to see if I could see which version it was introduced in. Again, we didn't really announce it in the release notes. It was actually, I believe it was introduced in one of the 12X releases, one of the early 12X releases. I don't have that answer off the top of my head, but that's certainly something we can circle back on, and we'll get that out to you guys in the follow-up.
And I would add, just to reinforce that, we have several hundred customers using flexible licensing now, and in several of those cases, the initial migration, the early adopters, were people who had some specific licensing issue, or that made us want to focus on them to resolve problems. For instance, if you are a subscription customer with us and you were using our cloud-hosted subscription license servers, sometimes really remote locations in the world, despite the fact that we had a number of licensed, subscription nodes operating, had transit time issues or intermittent network connectivity issues. And the advantage now with flex licensing is that your processes are always only communicating with a local license server, even for a subscription license, by example, and the license server itself periodically communicates with us to retrieve new licenses, for instance. So if you update your license provisioning for an existing instance, the information moves down automatically. You don't have to go upload a file or download a file or do anything else. There's no paperwork or transient steps involved for you as a customer. Your local license server is provisioned with a server ID that corresponds to information in our license cloud, and they exchange information seamlessly on a regular basis to refresh things like license maintenance dates, available licenses that you've chosen to deploy, or to relocate to another license server, for instance. So a lot of ease of use improvements, as well as defense against bad network issues that come to play with flexible licensing, that should give you a hand in easing your operation.
A couple of other questions coming in here. A couple of people concerned about, they have a variety of existing deployments, both hosted and what have you, and they're concerned about, how does this licensing change impact them for the old versus existing licenses? And Jeff, I'm sure you'll clarify that obviously each of these things will be kind of worked through. But right,
and I tried to indicate that when we mentioned the shift to flexible licensing. We don't intend to orphan anybody, and we're only asking initially that new deployments or net new customers use flex licensing, so that we don't continue to add to the existing legacy licensing installation database. Existing deployments can remain if you would prefer to do that for the time being, although we think there are enough advantages and enough improvements in operational efficiency for both of us that we would encourage you to move existing deployments, but only at your convenience and and at your collaboration with us. We're not trying to push anybody out of the nest or off the cliff here with an unwarranted change or a premature change.
Indeed, and I think you had mentioned that on the subscription side of things, I think that was going to be the focused target area initially, right?
Yeah, we're going to be announcing a program in a very short amount of time to move existing subscription customers, and that's people who buy software licenses by the month, over to Flex entirely, because it's just proven to be so much more dependable than the existing legacy license mechanism for subscriptions. But premise installations, no, we would like to migrate, but we're not setting a hard migration timetable or anything yet for those customers.
Great, thanks for that, Jeff. Another question coming in. We've got, will the articles in the knowledge base become available in PDF format? So the answer to that one is kind of yes and no. So we had in the past maintained the our help articles, which basically migrated into the knowledge base in a variety of different formats to try and make it easier for people in out there in the real world to be able to access these things. What we found is the web-based knowledge base that we have now seems to be a very popular medium for everybody, and it's universally accepted and universally accessible. So really, we want to try and focus our energies on keeping that thing as up to date and fresh as we can. If we were to produce it in PDF formats, as soon as we produce that, it's going to become out of date and very difficult to maintain and manage over a period of time. However, if somebody is interested in taking a snapshot of a page or a few articles and things in PDF format, if you actually look at the one of the tools buttons on the knowledge base page, I believe there's an option there to print. So you can print off the article, and then when you come to select the printer type, I believe you should have the option, excuse me, to select a PDF printout. So it'll actually generate, excuse me, a PDF file as the output from that, if that's something that you desire. Okay. More questions on the monitoring specific to WMI or Windows events. Again, it kind of goes back to the answer that Jeff gave a few minutes ago. It's really this is not something that we are going to be interacting with any other monitoring services. So we're not going to provide details on how to plug this into any Windows or Linux monitoring services, because there are just a plethora of them out there that everybody's using. We've made this so that it's kind of a pull type interface. So if something wants to get the access, it gets access to the status of the various LumenVox services, then this interface is there to be used if you so choose. So hopefully that answers that. If anybody has any very specific questions, obviously we can follow up offline if need be, after the webinar, to go into a little bit more detail if that's needed.
Indeed.
Yep. We've got some questions about customers in isolated environments. How does Flex licensing affect that in the long term?
Okay. So Flex licensing does require that your local license server be able to periodically communicate with the LumenVox cloud in order to report in, hi, I'm here, I'm healthy, and ask the question, do I have any new licenses available? The only exception we make to that currently is in Defense Department or governmental implementations, which are absolutely unavailable, and we have for network connectivity due to government security reasons. Aside from that, we require that the license server have network connectivity periodically and be able to reach the LumenVox cloud. The knowledge base articles that I mentioned about flexible licensing and about network connectivity cover the specifics of that. And what we've found so far is that even in the most demanding data center security environments, that our mechanisms are actually quite acceptable to the security teams, because there's no personally identifiable information exchanged in that communications process. It can be both encrypted and use HTTPS communication. We have a number of things that we can do. We've even had some customers who've gone so far as to set their license server up outside of their data center environment, provide it secure access into the data center from a DMZ zone and then outward to our license cloud, but with firewall restrictions in place that control the exact targets of communication. The other thing is that the license server locally always initiates communication. LumenVox never reaches into your data center. The local license server in your data center reaches out to LumenVox for that communications process. And it has safety mechanisms built in such that if there is a disruption in network connectivity for some period of time, it will still continue to perform successfully for an extended period without having any difficulties. So we've tried to take into account both security, practical network issues, and a number of configuration options to make this work for virtually every customer.
And I would even go on to say, Jeff, and that was a good overview there of the mechanism. I would even go as far as to say that all of the communication that Jeff just described is by default encrypted. So there's really not only no user identifiable information in the very small packets that go back and forth, but all of that communication is encrypted anyway. And we should probably even perhaps clarify, what the thinking is behind, why does this thing have to communicate with LumenVox? And again, let's go back to some of the original thinking as to why we did the flexible licensing mechanism in the first place, was to ease the mechanism and ease some of the friction points that customers were having in being able to install and update various licenses. So it's not that we're particularly trying to monitor license usage. We're actually trying to help you guys be able to better manage your own licenses. So for example, when you update your maintenance or when you install new licenses, the whole thing is really automated through this flexible cloud mechanism, so that you don't have to go through the painful efforts of installing. Those of you that are using the legacy system, I'm sure understand some of the pains that I'm describing about how you go about actually installing or updating the LumenVox licenses in that legacy system. The point of the flexible system was really to try and remove that pain and remove that painful process, so that the whole thing is fully automated.
I would add, our client services team and our sales team and the development team had long conversations before Flex was laid out, with the intent of removing every friction point that we could identify in the license purchase and installation and deployment process. So we work really, really hard to make sure that this is transparent and easy and dependable, so that there's no friction there for you in the process. I see there are a couple of other questions actually flowing in around Flex connectivity, and that's basically a TCP/IP. To answer the questions, it's TCP/IP communication. It is configurable as to what port or ports are being used. In the dashboard configuration screen, you can see the choices that are available for the license server, and it communicates with one of 10 predefined nodes, which you see in that network connectivity test that we had a screenshot of in the LumenVox cloud. So we have a number of different points of contact available. The local license server reaches out and tries, Nigel, correct me if I'm wrong here, it walks that list, and as soon as it gets an available connection, it communicates and then disengages. Correct. So we make sure that there are multiple points of contact on our side available, so that volume of usage or network connectivity is not an issue for you, and we have much redundancy as a result also on our side from a license server perspective. And the communication is very brief. It's a few milliseconds and some packets of data. It's not like we're sending an army of information back and forth.
Yeah.
So
and maybe a little bit more specific to one of the things that we found with data center managers and obviously management of firewall rules and this kind of thing was having various options. For example, we could have just supported TCP port 80, which is the HTTP default port. But that may not work for all instances. So we support both HTTP connectivity, and there are several port options that we support for that, and the same for HTTPS. So you can choose whether you want to use HTTP or HTTPS for the TCP connection, and you also have a variety of ports with both of those flavors. And whichever one you choose, the communication is always encrypted anyway. So regardless of whether you're using HTTPS, the secure mode, or regular HTTP, the communication is always going to be encrypted anyway.
All right. Well, it looks like the questions are slowing down a bit now. I think we've covered everything that has come in, and I would like to be respectful of your time. I know this has run a little bit longer than some of our previous webcasts, but we've had lots of things to talk about here. So I'm going to move on, if we can, to the couple of conclusion items I wanted to go over. And I will tell you that in addition to what you get here, you can download a PDF copy of the slide deck. It's already available, and it will a hyperlink for that will come in the follow-up email that the GoToWebinar system sends out. You'll also get a brief survey as part of that follow-up email from GoToWebinar that we'd really appreciate your answering the 3 questions there. I think there's 3 or 4 questions, so it'll only take a moment, and give us some feedback on how useful this webinar was, whether it was the right kind and level of information, and what else we can do to assist you going forward. So if you still have any questions, we're always glad to have a deeper technical discussion with you. Feel free to communicate with us via the LumenVox Developer Network and the blogs there. We really want to encourage people to use that forum for you to talk amongst yourselves and for us to respond, or reach out to LumenVox Technical Support. You guys all know the ways to do that, support@lumenvox.com, or call our corporate number at 858-707-7700 and simply ask for technical support at the auto attendant, and we'll be glad to engage in some further conversation with you. We also will let you know that we're planning a follow-up webcast, and we'll announce that probably in 3 or 4 weeks. That's going to be a deep dive on using the dashboard. We realize this forum is an introduction to the material, but there's a lot of content there that goes deeper, and the advantages or the ways to use it might not be self-evident for everybody. So we plan on doing for our partners and our customers a little bit of a deep dive on the dashboard probably in February, so keep an eye out for that. And if you have any feedback for us on any other things that you'd like to see discussed or presented in more detail in a webcast, feel free to drop us a note. You can communicate with the support at LumenVox, or you can send me a note at jeff@lumenvox.com, and we'd be delighted to have a conversation that extends further and get your feedback, because we really are striving to be a company that listens to our customers, is responsive to them, and makes using speech recognition easier and easier for everyone. So with that, Nigel, anything else you'd like to add? And otherwise, I think we can say thanks.
No, I think you've covered all the bases there, and I think yeah, this is an exciting release, and you know, as Jeff mentioned, this is part of our broader picture in trying to support, better support our customers and better put some of these tools into your hands and make life easier for you.
All right. So with that, ladies and gents, thanks for attending and giving us an hour of your time almost this morning. Hopefully it's been useful information, and feel free to reach out to us for follow-up on any of the topics, whether it's flex licensing, upgrading, or anything else that you might have in your mind. So with that, have a great day, and thanks.